those as well. So let's dive right in so that way I make sure I have enough time. Really quick though, a quick announcement is on Monday, we're having our guest speaker, we're having Cynthia, who did the mindset workshop, I want to say like 3 weeks ago. She's coming back on. She's the one who did the breath workshop. And I know many of y'all enjoyed that. It was more like the mindfulness, tuning into your body. So a little different style from the mindset workshops that I usually do, but I think hers are equally important in making sure that our head is in the game. So I will get started here on the questions that I want to talk about today. So someone asked me a little bit about, well, the conversation came about based on digestion. And, you know, when we adopt a whole food plant-based diet, especially when we're coming from a diet that is, you know, maybe a little bit heavier in the meat replacements, or maybe we're just used to kind of eating like junk food or skipping meals, or just not really tuned into our nutrition, to then switching over to doing more of a whole food plant-based approach that, you know, we don't rely a lot on like tofu and tempeh and all of the other like Beyond, and you know, so we're going to expect an increase in fiber. And when we have an increase in fiber and our body is not used to that increase, then bloating can happen. And bloating can affect people in different ways, or just like the whole issue with digestion can affect people in different ways. For some, it's just minor discomfort. Like, yeah, I'm a little bloated, a little bit gassy, but you know, nothing that's like interfering with my life. And then for others, it can be very uncomfortable, just depending on, you know, your digestion, the situation you were in coming into this when you made this change. And I know many times well, in general, bloating is not fun, right? So we're going to want to avoid the things that create the bloating. However, this is a temporary issue. So I know many that like have stayed away from consuming beans, have stayed away from consuming certain veggies because they're like, no, my body doesn't like it, I bloat. And I want to let you know that in most cases, I don't want to say in every case, but in most cases, it's not a matter of your body not being able to digest it. It's that it's learning how to handle the change in your diet. Typically, the discomfort can last anywhere from maybe 2 weeks up to maybe 3 months, just depending on how long it takes your body to adjust. However, at the end of the day, we want to have a lot of fiber in our diet. We like, don't let the bloating discourage you. If you feel like it can be a real problem and you just aren't feeling right, it's not a bad idea to maybe have a food sensitivities test and just make sure that you don't have like an actual sensitivity or allergy to the bean or the legume or whatever food that you feel might be giving you the discomfort. I feel like when it comes to our health and our body, we can never have too much information. So at least if you do feel maybe something is off and you get a food sensitivities test, you can rule out any possible, you know, concerns. Or let's say you are allergic to lentils, or you are sensitive to black beans or kidney beans or whatever, then at least now you know, okay, so I want to make sure I can adjust my diet accordingly. So fiber overall is a very good thing. Fiber is only found in plant foods as well. So if you're not eating a whole lot of plant foods in their natural form, you're going to be pretty low on fiber, which many of us coming into before going whole food plant-based, we're low in fiber. And fiber is needed for a very robust and healthy gut microbiome. So I don't want you to feel discouraged because you are experiencing bloating for a little bit. I don't want that to discourage you from consuming more fiber. Fiber is also considered a complex carbohydrate. So I know for many of us coming from like a very, very significant diet culture, we might have gone through phases where we did low carb. And then we found out that the moment we got off of the low carb, we felt super bloated all the time. And that's probably because you went from having very, very little fiber, and then you started eating more fiber and you started bloating. And then you thought like, oh my gosh, I'm gaining weight. My body doesn't do well with carbs, when really that's not the case. So I just want to make sure that you know that if you are experiencing any kind of digestive discomfort as you're making changes to your diet, that's normal. And what you can do to combat that is you can blend your food in like smoothies. That helps because it helps your body break that down, or it's already broken down a lot for you. Or you can try and ease your way in. So if, for instance, having your food steamed is going to be easier to digest than having it raw. So if you're doing like a lot of leafy green salads or having a lot of just raw veggies, try steaming them first, and that will help your body break that down a little bit further so you don't experience as much bloating. But definitely want to get all those fruits and veggies in regardless. Any questions on that? Oh, I thought I heard something. Okay. Now, there's also on that topic of fiber and complex carbs and the whole talk about good carbs, bad carbs. I recently had a conversation during a check-in about like, okay, what's this whole thing about like, this is a bad carb or this is a good carb. So I really don't like the terms like good and bad because there's room for pretty much anything in your diet without needing to feel like it's bad, like, oh my gosh, I did a bad thing because I ate this. I don't want you to have that kind of like positive and negative relationship with different things that you eat. There's room for everything. Like if you want to go and have, you know, like a cinnamon roll at a vegan farmer's market, like I don't want you to feel bad about that or like have this cloud over your head like I did something bad, I ate something bad, because there's room for everything as long as you're intentional about your nutrition as a whole and you know, okay, like I'm doing well most of the time, I have room to play and everything's going to be okay. But if we talk about just how certain carbohydrates, how they relate to your body and your overall gut health, there are certain carbs that do a lot for your overall health and for your digestion, other things. And those are going to be things like brown rice, the carbs and the fiber that you find in plant foods like lentils and pumpkin seeds and lentils and quinoa. And then there are the carbs that you find in foods like pasta and flour and sugar and corn syrup and bread that don't really have fiber in them. It's just straight up sugar, basically. And those are the kinds that are not always going to be consistent with your health goals long term. So I don't want you to see these things as like bad carbs or like don't eat these, because again, like there's a time and place for everything. But if we are looking at like what carbs are going to be most helpful, carbs in general are not going to hinder your success. It's the type of food that you're eating, the type of carbs that you're eating that could either slow down your progress, hurt your progress, or help your progress. So just something to consider. I don't want you to think that, you know, a piece of spaghetti is going to be equivalent to, you know, a handful of lentils if they have the same carb content, because one is going to do a lot to help you and one is not so much. So something to think about there. Another thing when we are looking at like carbs that are in fruits, veggies, nuts, and seeds, what makes those different from what you see like in pasta and bread and flour and such is the veggie and the fruit comes as a package. So if you think about like a cucumber, you're eating the skin, you're eating the little seeds, you're consuming the juice and the water that's in the fruit and the veggie. So it comes as like a package deal. When you consume it, your body like really knows what to do with all that. Whereas if you look at something like a piece of bread or like corn syrup, it's been extracted, it's been refined down to a point where it's kind of like robbed of a lot of its nutrients. So it's just like it's crazy for people to think that all carbs are created equal and all sugars at the same time are created equal, because they couldn't be more different. So many people will see our dieting style and be like, oh my God, that's so many carbs, and maybe even start to get you thinking or freak you out like, oh my gosh, am I eating too many carbs? But understand that there's a huge difference in the carbs that are coming from your pumpkin seeds versus the carbs that are coming from corn syrup. You know, on a label, it's going to look similar because it isn't kind of like the scale. When we weigh ourselves, all we see is like the number. We don't know how much of that is muscle, fat, bones, water. We don't know. So same thing, we look at a label and we're comparing two labels and we're like, okay, one has, 20 grams of carbs, the other one has 20 grams of carbs, they must be the same. No way. So the same way that 20 pounds of fat is nowhere near the same as 20 pounds of muscle, we can't really compare the two. So something to consider for those of you that are still newer to the whole food plant-based lifestyle. It would be silly for people to really judge the carbs as like for like. What you are eating is so much more high in quality than majority of what Americans eat. And you're putting all the good fiber into your body and just setting your body up for success long term. So I wanted to just specify that a little bit because there was talk about like carbs and fiber and bloating and just how all of these work together. So I wanted to clarify that a little bit. Any questions with that before I move into the next question that I wanted to answer? No? Good? Okay. And feel free to drop anything in the chat if you want me to elaborate on anything, if you wanted to add something or ask anything, whatever. Okay, so the next question was, how do we know like how much weight we should pick up on our workouts? So this is a very good question, and it depends. No one can tell you how much weight you are able to lift except for you. And sometimes it takes us a little while to figure out where our strength actually lies. But I can say with extreme confidence that pretty much all of you can lift more than you think. And what stops us is just, it's fear. Like, and I get it because you're picking up weight and it could be dangerous if you don't feel like you're doing it right, or if you don't feel confident yet picking up that weight, or maybe just in general, you don't feel that confident with that activity. Like, let's say you feel like your form is off, you're going to, of course, be a little bit skeptical to pick up really heavy weight. And that's good. I don't want you to just like recklessly be throwing around weight and not even be sure if you're doing it right. However, assuming that your form is okay, I'm willing to bet that you can pick up a lot more weight than you think. And it's important that we do challenge those limits and those boundaries, because when we think of what actually creates muscle, it's damaging and wearing down the existing muscle that's there. The only way we're going to damage it down and wear it down is to overexert it, to push it past its limits. So if you're always working out in the same realm, you're picking up the same weight all the time. And, if you look on, for example, on the training app, it'll tell you what your record is for that activity. So let's say you're doing walking lunges, and for the last several weeks, you've been doing 10-pound dumbbells and you haven't changed that, then it's probably just our own mind that's limiting us from picking up more weight. Something to consider, though, is if you're getting comfortable picking up a certain amount of weight, your body's not going to rebuild that muscle bigger and fuller and stronger, because you're just maintaining that muscle now. You're not doing anything to wear it down and for it to rebuild bigger. So we kind of get stuck like feeling and looking the same for a bit, especially after we reach a certain threshold in our journey, because we are not going out of our way to ensure that we're picking up heavier and heavier weights, or doing more reps, or being more connected to our muscles as we work out. So only you know how much weight you can pick up, and it's a challenge for you to figure that out too. It's something I challenge you to find out, because I can't tell you that. Like, only you know. But a good rule of thumb is, let's say you see on your training plan to do squats, let's say 3 sets of 10, and you're going in to do your first set, and you pick up maybe you pick up like a 25-pound dumbbell. You're going to do a goblet squat, let's say, and you do your 10, and you're like, I probably could have done like 5 more. But you don't, because it says 3 sets of 10. Then, like if you could have done, let's say 5 more, then that weight was obviously too light. So you want to pick up something heavier. Now, if you are on like your 5th rep and you're like shaking and you're like, oh my God, this is so hard, then maybe it's a little bit too heavy. So what we want is for those the last 30-ish% of those reps. So if, let's say you have goblet squats 3 sets of 10, then like at the 7th one, you want to be like, whoo, this is tough. Not killing you, but like, this is really challenging me. I don't know if I can finish my final 3. Maybe you can finish 2 more, maybe you can finish all 3, but if you're doing 3 sets of 10, you want that 10th one, you want to have to squeeze that 10th one out. So just something to think about. Now, we give you a lot of different rep ranges, especially as you go like into like, let's say months like 4, 5, and 6, we'll start doing like pyramids. We'll start doing high reps. We'll start doing low reps. So it's going to depend, but typically you want the final like third of your workout to like really, really challenge you. And if you stop before you allow yourself to be fully challenged, just know that you're missing that opportunity to wear the muscle down so your body can rebuild it stronger and fuller and bigger. So just think about that. That's also why we will we'll frequently do like as many reps as possible, the AMRAP on your training plan. So let's say you're doing like push-ups on your knees. It'll say do 3 sets, as many reps as possible. Because this is a body weight workout and you're not picking up weights, it's important that you go as long as you need to in order to feel like, whoo, okay, I did my best there. So just know that those like as many reps as possible workouts are super, super important in your gaining of strength, of muscle, of all of that. Now, just to kind of give you guys like a little bit of the science behind the as many reps as possible workouts, what we're looking for is the number of stimulating reps. So you might think, now let me use just like an air squat as an example instead of the push-ups, because for some push-ups, even the first 3 are really hard. But almost all of us can pretty easily do some like body weight squats, right? Some of us can do 5 and it feels like nothing. Some can do like 30 and it feels like nothing. And some maybe 30 is really, really hard. Regardless, the number of stimulating reps is what matters. So once things get hard is when you're actually being like stimulated. The first few were just warming you up, building you up to that stimulation. It didn't do anything for you. Like I can jump up right now, do 5 body weight squats. My body does not care. I was like, whatever, we've done this a million times. Like this doesn't stimulate me in any way or in a very mild way. So what we want is those stimulating reps. So typically for most people, we want, like, let's say if, I'm trying to explain this so it makes sense because it can be kind of difficult to like, for me to get my point across, I suppose. So like, let's say if, hold on. Let's say if you can do 20 body weight squats and 20 is like your max, right? And like the last, let's say 5 to 7 reps, those are the hard ones, right? So those are the ones that mattered. The other like 13 to 16 reps, I don't want to say they didn't matter because obviously they were what got you to that point where you were stimulated, but really the reps that really counted were those like last 5, which is why it is so, so important that you're constantly challenging your limits. Because 1 week you might max out at 20, but then 2 weeks later, you might max out at 30 and then at 40 and then at 50. But if we're not challenging ourselves and we stay at 20, then we completely miss all of those stimulating reps. And it's those stimulating reps that create that muscle building stimulus. So that's why people fall into like a plateau where they're like, oh, I've been working out for years and I just don't see any more change because we stop challenging ourselves in the same way. And all of our workouts are just to maintain our body and we're no longer giving ourselves that muscle building stimulus. So something to consider, and this is why it's very important that you really tune into your body while you're training and make sure that you're doing your absolute best as often as you can, because those last reps that you squeeze out, those are the ones that matter the most. It's always like those last ones, which are the hardest, and those are typically the ones we avoid because they're really hard, right? Now, this is also the beauty of lifting heavy weight because it takes less for you to achieve that stimulus. Obviously, with body weight squats, you have to do a bunch of them before you start feeling that stimulus. However, when you put a barbell on your back and you put weight on that barbell, now all of a sudden you don't need to do 20 before you start getting that stimulation. You might only need to do like 3 and then it's really hard, or 2 and then it's really hard, or like 5 and then it's really hard. So you don't have to spend so much time just to get this like stimulus in your muscles. Does that make sense? So that's why I want to make sure that you're constantly utilizing weights whenever you can, and then that you're challenging yourself even past that. Okay. Now I had some questions about developing the glutes. I feel like this is most of our favorite muscle. So someone was asking like, okay, which workouts specifically are the ones that like really, really target the glutes the most? Now we have a lot of workouts in the training plans that will target all of your lower body, but there are a few that will target specifically like for the glutes. And I think it's important for you to know which ones those are. So if you want to target the upper glutes, which is like, it's called like the shelf, kind of like back and then booty, right? This upper glute part, then we want to do abduction exercises. So think like the seated abductions where you put the band around your thighs and you're opening your legs, open and close like this. That will target the upper glutes. That's what will create the shelf. Same thing with things like the clams where you're opening your legs wide with the band around your thighs. Same thing with side steps where you're going from side to side with the band around your thighs. That's hitting the, well, those are hitting your abductors. That's what's going to create the nice shelf. If you're in a gym, if you're doing the abduction machine, that's what's going to help as well. If you want to target your lower glutes, this is great. Like for those that feel like you want to see more of a nice roundness before it hits your thighs, before it hits your lower thighs, your lower glutes there, then you want to do things more like squats and deadlifts because that will pull at the bottom of the glutes. Squats, deadlifts, those big workouts. And then if you want to target pretty much like the entire glute, that's where we do things like hip thrusts and glute bridges. Notice I put a shit ton of hip thrusts and glute bridges on your training plan. And that is for a reason. Sometimes it might feel redundant, like bridges again, or like hip thrusts again. Trust me, I get it. But this will give you the best results for overall glute development because those are a couple of the very, very few workouts that will target like all of the glutes and only the glutes. Because if you think about it, like, yes, you can do a bunch of squats and deadlifts, but you're going to be exhausted. Like it uses your whole body. I don't know if you can think of a time where you just did a bunch of deadlifts or a bunch of squats, like everything was sore, your back, your biceps, your legs, your glutes, your hamstrings, your quads, like everything's taxed out. So the great thing about hip thrusts and glute bridges is you're not exhausting all of your other muscles at the same time. You're really just getting into those glutes. So you're not going to be like limping the next day, like, oh, my quads are so sore, my hamstrings are so sore, I can't work out today. So that's why we do a lot of hip thrusts and glute bridges, because I'm not taxing the rest of your body and I'm not leaving you like unable to do your workouts for the next day. So just think about that when you feel like, oh, this is getting redundant. I already did bridges a couple days ago. I'm doing them again. Yes, because I want you to have some nice, full, round glutes. You'll thank me later. So those were the few questions I wanted to answer. And sure enough, it took up the whole half hour. But if anyone has any questions on what I talked about here, or if this was helpful, if you want to add anything, feel free to drop that in the chat. You can come on audio if you like. Was this helpful or was it kind of just all over the place?
I was just, when you were talking about the lifting the weights and like knowing what weight to lift, then I was thinking about like one exercise in particular is the back row with the dumbbell. And then I was thinking about how sometimes the reps will be less, so then I'll go heavier. But then if I've been doing that for like a while and then all of a sudden the training plan says like, okay, instead of 10 reps, do 15. Mm-hmm. Am I to the point where I should be trying to do 15 with that one that I was doing at less? Or because I always feel like, well, maybe I'll just do a little bit less because maybe I won't get through all the way to that amount of reps. But then now I'm like thinking, am I not challenging myself? I mean, it always feels like it feels heavy when I'm getting to the point at the end, but then I'm thinking like, should I have done more? Or I don't know. Like,
no, that's a really, really good question. I'm glad you're bringing that up. So no, you want to stick to the rep ranges. So obviously, if you were only needing to do 5, you can pick up really heavy weights. But if you have to do 20, you can't pick up that same weight. So when we're talking about like the terms that describe this, called progressive overload. You guys have probably seen this like on Instagram and stuff by now because everyone talks about it. But progressive overload means a lot of different things. It can mean more reps. It can mean heavier weights. It can mean slower reps. It can mean going deeper. It can mean shorter rest periods. What it basically stands for is do better. So that can be a lot of things. Doing better can mean doing more reps. Doing better could be picking up heavier weight. So what we're doing is hitting different ways of doing better. So I don't want you to think that you should be like getting your max weight and doing a ton of reps, because you might not be able to, and that's okay. So if whatever you need to pick up in order to successfully complete the rep range is good. What I would prefer you not to do is say, oh, I'm just going to do 20 instead of 12 because I can. I would rather you just pick up heavier weight and do 12 instead of just going for 20. So the rep ranges are strategically in place for a reason. because I want you to hit things in different ways, because that's what's going to make you a more developed, I don't even know what the word would be, but it's just going to make you better overall.
Well, I guess it's more so confusing because the rep range is like so little in between. So it's either like 15 or 12. So then I'm like, should I do the one that I've been doing? I don't know.
15 and 12, it's almost the same.
Okay.
So like as far as
So
how your body responds to 15 and 12, it's almost the same.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I believe if you can do 12, you probably could do 15.
Okay. Then that makes sense.
And if you squeeze out like 14 and not 15, that's still success. Or if you squeeze out 13 and like the last few reps were like really tough, but you did it, that's still success to me. Yeah. Same thing, like if you're picking up weights to do 12 and like by the 10th one, you're like, oh, okay, that's all I got. That's still success to me. You don't have to hit it like exactly on there. It's just to tell you approximately where you want to be at.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. So the way that it's kind of like blocked out is like, you can do short amount of reps, like anywhere from 3 to 5. And then you have like your 8 to 12, which are all kind of like the same. And then you have your like 15 to 20 plus, which are all kind of the same. But if you're going to do like 10 versus 13 versus 15, it's all pretty much the same. The important thing is that you're challenging yourself and that the last like 30-ish% of that workout was like tough for you. So that way you can get that stimulus to build a muscle.
Okay. Well, now I'm really wish my rest day wasn't today and tomorrow. Like this whole conversation has been making me want to go to the gym, and I'm like, I want to go heavier and see what's up. But I feel like I do like really push especially that one exercise with the rows. I've been like, I remember a while ago, like doing, I don't know, maybe like 10 reps with 40 was like a really big accomplishment. And then now I'm kind of noticing that it's like getting lighter and I can get to like 12. But then when I saw the 15 reps, I was like, maybe I do 35, which was still challenging. But now I'm like, yeah, I probably could have done it with 40.
Yeah, I would much rather you push your limits and only get to like 12 instead of 15 than go below your limits because you're like, well, I don't know. Like always push your limits. Always, always, always. Your body's capable of so much more than you think. Like it's crazy. That's why if you ever like go to the gym with a friend or something and they spot you, you'll be surprised how much you can pump out. And you're like, wow, just because that fear is gone or that uncertainty. Like, oh my gosh, I did way more of these. Usually I can only do like 6. And this time I did 10 just because you don't have that fear of like, oh my gosh, what if I drop this? What if I make a fool of myself? What if I can't pick it back up? So a lot of the limitation is in our head. Our bodies are really, really amazing and they can do a lot more than we think.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hopefully this excites everyone to go work out now. That sums up our half hour. So unless anyone has any final questions, we'll just log off here. Anything? We're good? Okay. All right. Well, then you guys have an amazing week and we'll talk really soon.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
No problem. Bye.